It is Friday, June 14th. Let's talk PlayStation. So before we get started, I just want to mention real quick, it's actually not Friday for me. I'm filming this on a Tuesday because tomorrow I'm actually driving to Chicago and I won't be back until about midday Saturday. So I do have to film this quite early, but there's actually a good amount of news still coming out of E3 right now. So I feel like we've got a pretty good show, but I'm just letting you know if some major PlayStation news story comes out and I'm not talking about it, that's why, because this is still going to go up on Friday as usual. But yeah, there's still a lot of good E3 stuff going on. I mean, really, E3's been okay so far. It's been pretty lukewarm of a year, honestly, and that's because we're in that transitional period when it comes to Microsoft and Sony, but also all third-party publishers when it comes to them developing their games and getting ready for the next generation. So that's why a lot of these games that we're seeing, not a lot of gameplay demos, it's a lot of cinematic stuff, but certainly still some good stuff going on. So before we get to that real quick, our PlayStation Plus Instant Game Collection reminder for the month of June 2019, it is Sonic Mania and Borderlands Enhancement Collection. You have until July to download these games. And actually for our first news story, it's outside of E3, which is that Cory Barlog, the director of God of War, recently sent out some tweets. Well, actually it was about a month ago he sent these out, maybe a little bit further than that, and nobody realized that there's actually a little tease in there where a string of tweets where he was discussing the game's development. If you actually take the first letter of every single tweet, it spells out Ragnarok is coming. And this isn't the first time Cory has teased us about Ragnarok is coming. Now, if you're out of the loop, real quick, Ragnarok is coming. Ragnarok refers to the end of Norse mythology. A lot of people are assuming that he's teasing either an expansion DLC or presumably the sequel to God of War, which you no doubt would figure Sony Santa Monica is going to be starting that up either now, soon, or it's certainly in the works. I mean, the success of the 2018 God of War is not understated. We're definitely going to get a sequel to that game, and so Cory is he's super active on Twitter. I mean, when the game came out, we pretty much had a God of War news story every single week because Cory was always talking about the game. Even after it came out, the team was discussing some things about how the game was made and whatnot, and then we got the documentary not that long ago. So very cool. So Cory's certainly gearing up for the next project, and I'm sure he's very excited, and I'm sure he's quite happy with the success the game has found because it probably took a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to make it. Again, go watch that documentary. So yeah, good to see that we have a general idea of where the next God of War is going. Now, going into an actual E3 news story, Double Fine Productions was recently acquired by Microsoft Game Studios, announced during their E3 2019 press conference, and that's a very good get for them. They're a great developer, and they're making Psychonauts 2, but this led a lot of people wondering, wait, is Psychonauts 2 still coming to PS4? The answer is yes. So Tim Schafer recently tweeted out that yes, you can still expect Psychonauts 2 on all platforms, but they did reiterate that we will be a Microsoft Game Studio moving forward after this project, so you would assume that once they wrap up the game, they're going to be doing games exclusively for Xbox and PC, which is not surprising whatsoever. This is actually the exact case with Microsoft's other recent acquirements. Obsidian, for example, The Outer Worlds, that's still coming to PS4 because these games were still in production. You have to understand that the foundation and development cycle for these games were laid out, and actually specifically with the Obsidian deal, they're still actually co-publishing that game with Private Division, which is under Take-Two, and so that explains why that game's obviously still coming to PS4, but the IP will now go to Microsoft once that game is shipped, and you can expect a sequel to Outer Worlds or whatever Obsidian pumps out to come out on PS4. And there was that other developer that is producing Wasteland 3, I think it is, and that's still coming to PS4, but again, once that developer is all finished up with that project, it will be exclusively developing games for Microsoft Game Studios, so you'll expect Xbox and PC strictly there afterwards. So it's good that we've got that confirmation. That's expected, though. I know a lot of people got a little worried about that off the bat, so we will get Psychonauts 2, but after that, no, we're not getting anything out of Double Fine. Actually, I should mention this real quick before we get to the next news story, but I know some people will bring up Mojang, for example, when it comes to Microsoft acquiring a studio and then them still releasing games on PlayStation, and that's the Minecraft IP. The thing you have to understand is that it's because it's Minecraft, so that IP is just too substantial, it's too large. Microsoft would not make nearly as much money keeping it exclusive to Xbox and PC as they would releasing it on pretty much every platform imaginable. It just would sell way too much software on PlayStation. They would not recoup the possible loss of keeping it on just Xbox hardware and PC. So that's why even the recent Minecraft dungeon game that they're releasing, that top-down game, even that's still coming to PlayStation. They know why, because the IP is just way too big. It wouldn't make any sense financially. So just explaining that one too. And now we can move on to Square Enix E3 2019, because quite honestly, I think this is one of the best shows they've had in a very long time. They showed a lot of great stuff that people are really going to enjoy. The Avengers looks fantastic. I think people are actually really excited about that. It looks promising. But we're all here to talk about Final Fantasy VII Remake, because we knew that they were holding a concert. We knew that we would get more details during their actual press conference, and sure enough, we got some major details about the game. One thing being that we have a release date, everybody, March 3rd, 2020 for the first part of the Final Fantasy VII Remake, which is going to take place exclusively in Midgar. And so actually what we do know is that the game's actually going to be on 2 discs, and that's part 1, mind you. So part 1 of this game is so massive that it's going to be on 2 Blu-ray discs. They announced a bunch of collectors, special editions, there's a cool figure and everything, you know, they're going to be doing all that stuff. But they also showed off an extended reel of gameplay during E3 that was kind of walked through a little bit, showing off the HCB system, the real-time action. It looks very good. We actually saw Tifa for the first time. And wow, I mean, they got a lot more of this game done than we were led to believe, and it really shows, and it looks great. The thing is, what I'm curious to find out now is how much is done outside of Midgar, because that's what they're saying right now, is that part 1, you know, what they're doing right now with Midgar, that's essentially what we're getting March 3rd, 2020, and it's a very substantial, very large piece of content, which I think bodes well for what we could possibly expect later on. And I think many of us were very skeptical back in 2015 when it was confirmed that the game was episodic and it was going to be so massive, and we're like, well, what are you talking about? Just put the whole thing on 1 disc. But the very fact that they've got 2 Blu-ray discs for part 1 really does tell you that they're jamming a lot of content on there. Now, perhaps they're not optimizing their files properly, or maybe it's just typical Square Enix where they love to crunch a lot of very high-quality cutscenes in there, and that can certainly take up a lot of disk space on the Blu-ray. Who knows, but it does seem like the game actually is looking great, right? It looks like fans are actually really on board. They're giving Square Enix the benefit of the doubt here, and I think this is actually going to be a project that really, truly shines, and I think they're handling this very well. So it looks awesome. It's great to see so far. Now, if we backpedal a little bit to that Avengers announcement, we actually also did get confirmation that Sony has a partnership with Square Enix, so you can expect the beta to be first on PS4. You can expect some exclusive bonuses on PS4, probably some exclusive content. To what effect, we don't know. You would assume it has something to do with Spider-Man, maybe an exclusive character, a certain bonus level, who knows. But you can also probably assume that there's going to be marketing rights on Sony's side, so every time you see a commercial or something for this game, when it gets close to launch and when it does launch, you'll see, you know, the PlayStation logo everywhere and whatnot, even though the game's multi-platform. So good get for Sony, because this game does look like it's getting a lot of attention, and I think it will actually, I don't want to say like, oh, it's going to do as well as the Spider-Man game on PS4, but because that game just sold so much, and Sony put a lot of marketing dollars into that game, but the Avengers could very well see the same potential, so that's also probably a good idea for Sony to get in bed with Square Enix on this deal as well. Now, even though Sony is not going to be at E3, Sony Interactive Entertainment President and CEO Jim Ryan is still staying very busy by doing an interview with the Financial Times discussing the PlayStation business, and referencing the original deal that Sony had with Microsoft about a month ago, he actually confirms that the 2 brands will stay entirely separate. So he was actually quoted as saying, "There is, to my knowledge, no scenario where the PlayStation and Xbox platforms combine. The 2 platforms will remain separate with their separate identities and brands and fans." So 2 things that we take away immediately out of this quote. Now, one thing being that this confirms our suspicions from when we originally talked about this on Let's Talk PlayStation, which is that this is probably a deal that just had to be made public, and it really is more behind the scenes in terms of Microsoft, you know, getting something from Sony, Sony getting something from Microsoft, just to accomplish their own goals. They're not really working together in the sense of, you know, you're not going to see games going to other platforms and anything crazy like that, right? This really is more of a just behind the scenes deal that has to be made public, because inherently something as massive of Sony and Microsoft working together, especially with the Xbox and PlayStation brand. And it's not necessarily that, it's just a situation where Sony is buying Azure tech for PlayStation now, and Microsoft needs semiconductors and image sensors and stuff. I mean, it really is just business as usual, right? Supply and demand. But they have to make this public because of the amount of rumors and leaks that could come out of this. It could be very substantial, it could be very harmful for investors and things like that. It gets very complicated, and this stuff actually does have to be disclosed. So that's why that is, and it makes a whole lot of sense. The second thing I'm noticing is that he says, "to my knowledge," which really tells you that Jim Ryan probably didn't have any say in regards to Sony Corporation CEO Kenichiro Yoshida actually greenlighting this decision to work with Microsoft and actually buy the Azure tech. So it really goes to show that a very, very select few amount of people were involved in the actual process of scouting out trying to buy more cloud tech. Because the original rumor was stating that Sony originally approached Amazon to buy some cloud services, and Amazon, in some way, shape, or form, the deal wasn't very favorable, so Sony had to step away from that, and, well, they went to Microsoft and they came to a deal. So it really is weird, and it probably goes to show that the other rumor suggesting that PlayStation employees were very alarmed by this and almost frightened, wondering what's going on, why are we working with Microsoft, this and that, and managers had to calm down employees, that really, you know, took place. It's just like, wow, was Jim Ryan really not at all involved in this? it really makes you wonder where the hierarchy is involved and just how much say does Jim Ryan have when it comes to actually leading PlayStation. Because if this is something that he didn't have a matter or a say in, then, you know, it's a little, I wouldn't say troubling, but it's questionable, I guess, if that's the better way to put it. But at the very least, now we know that this really is a matter of just Sony needing something from Microsoft and Microsoft needing something from Sony. Moving on to our next news story, and file this one under a massive rumor, but word on the street, or the E3 street, is that PlayStation 5 is more powerful than Project Scarlett. That is what Game Informer executive editor Andrew Reiner has heard. He posted this tweet on June 9th. This was during Microsoft's show, saying that before the show, that's what he's hearing, is that PS5 is more powerful than Project Scarlett. Now, what you have to take away from this is that E3 is a place where you've got tons of developers, publishers, PR people, all in one big, massive convention center. Conversations are going to take place. You've got people that are working on both platforms. They do know, to some extent, now specs and everything probably are finalized at this point. These things have to be, you know, finalized well in advance to source parts, start manufacturing. Head game developers aim for, you know, a particular spec sheet of launching these games on the platform, making sure they're ready because games take so long to make. So the thing is, I'm not saying these rumors are true, but they don't necessarily just organically come out of nowhere, especially out of a show like E3 where, again, you've actually got the professionals that are working on these machines present together and talking. And, you know, it's a very conversational place. You know, you've got drinks and things like that. You've got after parties. So from what he's heard, that may very well be a real scenario. Now, you may have seen the E3 video I actually did not too long ago. And that was actually about Microsoft's show, because originally we weren't going to do an E3 video because, well, Sony's not here, so how much news are we really going to talk about? And certainly you're not going to see me do a Microsoft E3 press conference recap and impressions video, but it was so glaring of a thing to see that their Project Scarlett announcement, which was very much like their Xbox One X announcement, where it was like a 3-4 minute video with just some, you know, some of the Xbox team talking one-on-one with the camera, explaining their vision for the platform. But this thing sounded so damn similar to PlayStation 5. It really is eye-opening, and you just have to, we had to talk about that because these things are so damn similar. What I'm getting at in that video is that the power disparity, whether one is more powerful than the other or not, it really isn't going to matter in the long run. Now, admittedly, power has never really mattered in the games industry at the end of the day. PlayStation 2 was not very powerful on paper, but it was the most successful platform ever. Wii, not very powerful, but moved millions and millions of units. You know, PlayStation 4 Pro is not more powerful than Xbox One X. The fact that Xbox One X came out did not automatically make Microsoft the frontline winner in console sales. So we've got many examples of where it really doesn't matter when it comes to power. Obviously, there's certain advantages, and it certainly encourages one purchase over the other for certain consumers, but it really doesn't matter. For these platforms, though, it really is super irrelevant, given that at the very least they're both shipping with SSD, so developers can really design their games around that. That's the conversation we got in that video. But I think it's also pretty eye-opening in terms of why Sony did that article, because they probably caught wind of, you know, what Microsoft was also doing with the platform. And so they know that they're not going to be at E3. They're not going to show off the same shit over and over again. The thing is, I'm seeing a lot of people go, oh, Sony wasn't even at E3 and they won. But it's like, all right, guys, well, relax. Because if Sony actually did hold a conference, and let's say, yeah, they showed off the Death Stranding trailer, they saved that, and they maybe somehow convinced Square Enix to take the Final Fantasy VII Remake announcement that they had and just shove it into Sony's show, which now takes away a lot of the momentum that Square Enix had. So you kind of have to solve that problem there, because that's ruining Square's show. I mean, you have, what, 2 good announcements? What else do you have? Sony knows that they just can't really do the same, they can't bring the same 2 games, and even though it's good footage, and even though there's release date announcements, and it's exciting, you know, Sony probably would have been lambasted for not talking about PlayStation 5 or showing the box or discussing more about what the platform's going to do and whatnot. They're going to be saving that for a later event, and that's probably going to be PlayStation Experience. That's what I'm guessing. I would assume that's when we're going to get it. It could be maybe even in the first half of 2020, which would make more sense. I mean, we did get a PS4 announcement in February of 2013, and then the platform launched same year, holiday season, November. So, you know, we could be facing a situation like that. But it does seem like Sony knew that the platforms were very similar, and to announce it in, you know, something as simple as a quick article, a quick interview, explaining what the platform's going to do, and then you see Microsoft make this bold little cool video, and it's like, wait a second, we just heard this shit a month ago. It kind of does take the wind out of their announcement a little bit, and it does diminish it in the sense of like, well, that really didn't tell us much of anything. That's exactly what we're expecting out of Sony, and when you look at the previous generation, I mean, most people are buying PlayStation 4, so that's where Microsoft, I think, really dropped the ball. Not in the sense that they keep showing all these multi-platform games during their show, but that they also didn't really give us anything substantial when it comes to Scarlett. Now, you do also see Xbox head Phil Spencer. He did an interview not that long after their show, and he was explaining that, look, we're not necessarily trying to sell as many consoles as possible. That doesn't dictate our business. Now, I believe him, but I also feel like that's a little bit of damage control, because he does kind of understand that possibly going into the next generation, they still might not be, you know, the favorite to win in terms of moving more hardware units. And they understand that anyway. They've known that for the past 4 or 5 years now, when they realize that they're just not selling nearly as many Xbox Ones. And that's why they're focusing so much on putting Xbox anywhere. That's why they're doing this initiative with xCloud, where if you have an Xbox One, it turns, you know, you can turn that into a server basically and play the games that you have on your Xbox One for free on your phone or PC or tablet elsewhere. Even though you're not necessarily using their service, you're not paying for their service. You're actually still using xCloud, and they're offering that service for free. They've got Xbox Game Pass. They want you to be into their subscription. They want you to buy PC games. They don't really care at this point. So it's a bit of damage control, but they do genuinely just, that is where they're moving towards. They just don't care to sell as much hardware anymore, and I'm sure they would love to. There's no doubt about it, but I don't think they're necessarily having their eyes on the prize when it comes to beating Sony, because when you, and I agree, if you try to chase Sony, if you try to chase all these hardware sales, I think you're going to end up kind of losing focus and losing sight of what's important. And at the end of the day, as a business, that's making money. And so Microsoft knows they probably are better off chasing subscription, chasing streaming, chasing software sales on Xbox and PC. They get that. So while yes, PS5 is apparently going to be more powerful than Scarlett, I don't really think it matters at the end of the day. I think both of these machines are going to be visually stunning. I think once we get more demonstrations of these very quick SSD loading times, it's going to look fantastic. It's going to be very enticing. I think both machines are going to look very good. It's just more about those games and services, and I think that's what's really going to dictate success. So that'll be the conversation moving forward. Now let's get to Let's Talk Plus, which again, I have to apologize because I did have to pick a winner early, because I do have to film this early. So congratulations to Randall Blod. I already forgot off the top of my head. So you won. That's your name. I hope you know who you are. You probably do with a name like that. But I'll be contacting you very soon to send you your $10 PSN code. Now, if you would like to win a $10 PlayStation Network code, it's so easy. Follow that link down below. You know what to do. Supporting the channel, a number of ways can gain you an entry, and the winner will be announced next week, because I am trying to pay for your video games. Those are all the news stories I want to talk about, you guys, from this past week. So like I said, we did do an E3 video, but that was more about Microsoft's Project Scarlett in reference to what we know so far about PlayStation 5. And I know it was super out of place, but we still did a regular Tuesday video where I bought a Japanese PS2 recently. And so I thought we'd unbox that on camera, because it's a beautiful colorway. I even got a Japanese copy of Jak and Daxter, and we play that a little bit, so that's pretty fun. And Melissa's in that video, so I know you guys love Melissa. Go check that video out if you haven't yet. And I do apologize for having to film this so early. I really hope nothing crazy happens in terms of PlayStation, but if it does, you can always follow me on Twitter at Mystic Ryan. You can always get some live updates, news, and impressions there, as always, and actually also on Instagram, because I'll be posting some cool pictures from Chicago. And that's pretty much it. So that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Badecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.